Hey everybody, it's Dave here from Dragonhill Games, and you're watching This Week in MTG Finance. As always, and before we get started, I want to thank MTG Stocks for allowing us to use graphical information for the purposes of this video. Well, this week has been all about the reserve list, and of course there's been a bunch of movement around a bunch of the double masters cards, so we'll talk about all that as well. Let's dive right in, and we're going to start with our top 10 winners percentage-wise this week, and we're going to kick things off with Dimir Signet from Commander. Of course, all of the signets are huge Commander staples, and Dimir Signet is no exception. This particular version is up 45% this week, and none of the signets got a reprint in Double Masters, so all of them are on the rise a little bit. They don't make for the best investments because they get reprinted regularly. As we can see with Dimir Signet, it's been reprinted in a few different Commander decks, anthology versions, Masters versions, and of course things like Arch Enemy. Not the greatest investments, however, these cards definitely are huge time staples and expect them to be reprinted regularly. Now, every single one of the remaining cards on our top 10 list this week are all reserve list cards. So let's look at number 9, and that would be Caverns of Despair from Legends, currently valued at $87, and this is up 53% this week. At least I'm happy to see that most of the cards on the list this week that are reserve list, kind of buyouts, investment, sort of collector pickups, are cards that can actually see some play. Although if you go over to EDH Rec, Caverns of Despair doesn't really appear in a lot of decks. It's like under 100 decks. However, this could definitely be useful in some sort of casual or specific type build. It's an enchantment that costs 4, enchant worlds. All players may attack with no more than 2 creatures each turn and block with no more than 2 creatures each turn. So this definitely could have some play in various type casual decks, or if you specifically build around it. Now, our number 8 winner follows along those same sort of lines. Another reserve list card. This card is in all-time high territory at $30.50. It's also up 53% this week. 5 mana, instant speed, pay X life, target creature gets +X/+O until end of turn. If we head on over to EDH Rec, we can see it appears in about 1,500 decks, which is only 1% of the decks that this could actually appear in. However, it definitely gets some play and is employed in a lot of infect type strategies. Imagine just getting in one of your infect creatures, it goes unblocked, and then you go ahead and put hatred on that creature and wipe out one of your opponents. So clearly has some sort of commander uses, things like that. It's nice to see reserve list cards that can actually get used on the rise. Now let's have a good look at our number 7 winner this week, Sword of the Ages from Legends. Also a reserve list card. It's currently valued at $95, and Sword of the Ages is up 63% week over week. This is nowhere near all-time high territory. In fact, we're less than 50% of where the all-time record is for this card. And this tends to happen with cards that don't really see a lot of play in Commander or Legacy or anything like that. Now, Sword of the Ages it does have some uses, so don't get me wrong. This isn't like Giant Tortoise or something like that. 6 mana, it comes into play tapped, and then you can tap and sack it. You sack a bunch of creatures, you add up the total power of all those creatures, and then Sword of the Ages deals damage equal to the total power of all those creatures to any target. So it could definitely be used as some kind of finisher if you have some massive kind of board. If you're playing some sort of go wide strategy, or you play with a bunch of big stompies and you just kind of want to finish off your opponent at the end of the game, could definitely see some uses for the sword. However, it's really kind of wonky. It's kind of cute. I don't really see this getting played in any serious type commander decks. If we contrast that to something like Survival of the Fittest. So Survival of the Fittest has pretty much had like an uphill sort of climb. I mean, we've had a bit of a dip from all-time highs of around $112, previous all-time highs, down to like the $85, sort of $90 range. But then we've gone consistently up since then, since the spring of this year. And it's not on our list this week, but I wanted to show you guys a card that this is the type of card that I would actually invest in if I was looking at investing as sort of a reserve list type investor. I actually put in a few bids on Survival of the Fittest on various eBay listings, including some alternate language ones, a few Chinese ones, and things like that. And I've been unsuccessful in getting them even around the $200 mark. So this is definitely a card that's in high demand for something like Commander. And something like this I would consider to be a really good investment, considering it's on the reserve list card and gets a ton of play in Commander. Of course, if we go back to Sword of the Ages, cards that don't get a lot of play and aren't taken seriously in Commander tend to get massive sort of spikes and falls just like this. So these are the kind of cards that you have to be really careful with investing in if you're looking at being sort of a reserve list type investor. They just aren't in demand. So they get these massive spikes, they get cleared out of all the listings on things like eBay and that, and then other people kind of tear them out of their closet and go, oh, this thing's on an all-time high, maybe I'll try and list this. A bunch of them get listed, people realize it's not a very good card, and the price sort of crashes on them again. So these are the cards that I tend to avoid. But cards that get heavy play in either Legacy and or Commander are definitely good targets. Our number 6 winner actually baffles me. This is a really fun card though. Falling Star from Legends, currently at an all-time high of nearly $83, and this is up 76% this week. Cards banned in Commander because it's one of these, you sort of flip it from a certain height, I think it's a foot, and it has to rotate, and anything it lands on it deals 3 damage to. Anything that's not destroyed becomes tapped. So kind of a really fun card, and this was back in the day when Magic was really meant to be a lot of fun, and they didn't take the game nearly as seriously as we all do today. Now we look at this more of a competitive type game, and with good reason, of course. But back when Magic first sort of started, we had a lot of cards like this, Chaos Orb, Falling Stars, a bunch of cards that dealt with Ante and all that kind of stuff. And since then, of course, all that stuff's been banned. Falling Star, like I said, really interesting card. Banned in Commander, probably banned in Legacy. I mean, I haven't actually looked, but I can imagine something like this would be. And I find it really interesting, this graph, because it has a massive spike way back in 2017, and it kind of pretty much just stayed there. So if you own this card around the $4 range that it was in, previous to 2017, then you did pretty good on your money. Cards up again a huge amount this week, but this is one of those that, other than having sort of some nostalgic and fun kind of value to it, I don't really see why anyone would really want to own this card. And our number 5 winner this week, Tetsu Umazawa from Legends, is back on our list this week. That's right, this was one of the big winners from last week, and another card that kind of baffles my mind a little bit. Currently all-time high at $234. This thing just keeps going up week over week, and it is gonna crash hard just like it did back in 2017. It's not a card that gets played anywhere, doesn't see really any play in any Commander decks. In fact, I asked you guys last week if you own one, if you play one, even if you just play it for fun, please tell me why. Nobody responded to that. So that just right there tells me that this really is kind of a junky card that people are just targeting because it's on the reserve list. So I would expect that maybe this goes another week or two up like a rocket, and then we're going to see a massive fall and price decrease just like we did back in 2017. Now I like our number 4 winner, and that would be Acid Rain. This is up 117% to a fresh new all-time high of $130. Definitely could see some play in Commander, 4 mana, and destroy all forests in play. Really good, obviously, if you're not playing green in your deck. Of course, this is a reserve list card. It's in the rare slot from Legends, so the supply on this card would definitely be on the low side. Coming in at number 3 this week, we have Undiscovered Paradise from Visions, also a rare, currently valued at $17.50. This is up 145% this week. A reserve list card actually had an all-time high midweek last week of $20, so we're down a little bit from there. Funny ride on this card, seems to spike and then sort of slowly die over the course of a year or two, and then everybody gets interested in it, spikes again. This card's been doing the same thing for quite a while now. So I would expect that this will go up possibly a little bit more, and then we'll start to see a downward trend on Undiscovered Paradise. Of note though, each time it goes down, seems to retain a higher sort of overall price than it did on the last time it had a dip. So overall, I think Undiscovered Paradise is a really cool Commander card. Probably sees more play or more interest in maybe CEDH decks, because the downside on this is pretty serious. I mean, you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you need to return Undiscovered Paradise to your hand. hand. So the downside is definitely very serious on there. I can see, like I said, it getting a lot more play in maybe CEDH decks where you're going to win on turn 2 or 3 or something crazy, so you really don't care about the downside. But for the more sort of casual or sort of regular type commander player, maybe Undiscovered Paradise has a little bit less interest. Now our number 2 winner, A City of Shadows from the Dark, has the same kind of story as Undiscovered Paradise did in the number 3 spot. Currently valued at $97.50, had an interweek high of $130, so we're down quite a bit from there, but still up 295% week over week. Kind of an interesting card. You can exile one of your creatures and then put a counter on A City of Shadows, and then you can tap City of Shadows and add X colorless mana to your mana pool, where X is the amount of counters on City of Shadows. Seems like it could be really good in something like Atraxa. Definitely good if you generate a lot of tokens, keep making this thing bigger and bigger every turn, and ramping out into bigger and more awesome stuff. And our big winner this week, Ancestral Knowledge from Weatherlight, is up 1,150% to $50. That's right. This card was just $2.50 a week ago. Another reserve list card. It's a rare from Weatherlight. So again, supply on rares from these older sets is definitely on the low side. Kind of a cool card. I could see some uses for this card. Has a cumulative upkeep, which, God, cumulative upkeep is so annoying. I'm really glad they took that out of the game, essentially. When Ancestral Knowledge comes into play, you look at the top 10 cards of your library, then you can exile any number of them and put the rest back on the top of your library in any order. And of course, if Ancestral Knowledge leaves play, you shuffle your library. So obviously really good at either thinning out your deck, getting rid of a bunch of stuff, especially if you're playing maybe some sort of self-mill strategy or something like that, or just really nice to line up a bunch of awesome cards that you need for future turns onto the top of your deck. Interesting card, massive increases for this card. It's been a while since we've had a week where something had gone up over 1,000%. So that's really cool to see Ancestral Knowledge at the top of our list this week. All right, before we get into cards I'm investing in this week, as always, if you're a subscriber, you know I want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate your support. And if you're looking for a way to support this channel, we've recently launched our online store. Of course, we have all your favorite board games, role-playing games, miniatures, and MTG products. Now, just bear in mind, if you're outside of Canada, I can't ship any sealed MTG products across any borders, unfortunately. It's just a deal that all local game stores have with Wizards of the Coast. And that, of course, is www.dragonhillgames.com. You can find the link in the description below. All right, so last week I put out a video called Top 20 Cards from Double Masters that I would be investing in. Of course, all of the cards had target prices that are sort of my sweet spot where I become an investor in those cards for the future. Now, not all of them are going to hit my sort of targets, and if they don't hit the target prices, I'm just not an investor at that point. But a lot of them have already hit those targets and or gone under those. So some of the things would be things like Everflowing Chalice was on the list. That's well below 50 cents now. Mistress Baubles, I had a target of $3. This is at $2.95 and continuing to go down. My target on Maze of Ith was between $8 and $10, and we had already an $8.98 day. And even things like Cyclonic Rift, I had a target on Cyclonic Rift of around $20. Now we hit that on August 8th, and since then, along with actually most of the mythics, all of the good sort of rares and mythics from Double Masters have already started rebounding off of their bottoms. So now's the time to grab them up, especially if you're just looking at picking them up on the cheap for your own personal collection. But things like Cyclonic Rift, I'm still an investor at $23. A few of the cards that kind of surprised me were things like Force of Will. I really did think that with a bunch of these entering the marketplace, you know, we would hit that sort of $75 to kind of $85 range, and it never really got there. A lot of the mythics were sort of the same thing. I had Avacyn at around $20-$25. I think she bottomed out maybe around 27, something like that. But there's so many mythics in this set, and it just seems like, from what my experience is opening, and again, kind of we drafted all weekend in the store, so I saw a lot of packs and that kind of stuff opened. A lot of the really big hits, Force of Wills, Avacyns, Jaces, and that, they just really aren't coming up all that often. So there's not a whole lot of supply of this stuff actually entering into the market. And the price on these is actually really stable. So of course, things like Force of Will, Jason Mind Sculptor, I think is down around $60. These are great times to be picking this up for your personal collection, not necessarily for investment purposes. All right, let's look at some cards that I'm really interested in grabbing now that the price is doubling out, and we're going to focus on Double Masters. So Voice of Resurgence is a big one for me. I think this card's it obviously has a lot of potential in things like Pioneer and Modern, makes its way into some Commander decks. Card use sits around the $8 to sort of $10 range, so picking these up as future investments or definitely for your own personal use at around the $3 mark is an absolute steal. Up next, I really like Toxic Deluge from Double Masters. Now, for whatever reason, they have this listed incorrectly. It says borderless here, but the actual borderless one is the Double Masters Extra one. That one's currently sitting around $46. Really cool card, but the regular pack version from Double Masters is around the $18.50, kind of $19 mark. Fantastic time to be picking up Toxic Deluge, both for your own personal collection and for future investments. I mean, this card's usually around the $30 mark, so lots of room for movement on the upside here. The one that is really kind of baffling me a bit in terms of the price is Oubliette from Double Masters. Now, this is an uncommon. It's actually one of the higher priced uncommons. It's even beating out things like Mishra's Bauble. And I think the reason for that is because Oubliette really was only printed in Arabian Nights. It was such an expensive card. A lot of people didn't have them for their decks that want them. And now that they've reprinted Oubliette and kind of shifted around the wording a little bit, it's a lot easier to understand exactly what this thing does. Super useful in Commander, especially since you can kind of just put Oubliette into play, take someone's commander, make them phase it out, and it doesn't rephase back in until Oubliette leaves the battlefield. And of course, commanders that are phasing out don't change zones, so they don't have the option to go back to the command zone. It essentially just puts them in limbo until Oubliette is gone. I really thought that this one was going to fall down to the sort of $2 to $3 range, especially since it's not uncommon in Double Masters, but it seems to be holding steady around $4. So we're going to call this the value play for the week. I think $4 is a great time and investment for this card, especially for personal uses. I'm not sure where this card goes down the road, but I think a lot of people wanted Oubliettes, so people are actually holding on to them. They're not really ending up in the marketplace, and that's why the price really is holding steady. So really good value play at $4. Not sure exactly where the price is going to go from here. I do believe that it's going to go up, and I think years down the road, assuming not a bunch of reprints on Oubliette, this is probably a $5 to $10 card. And last but not least, we have our speculation play for the week, Double Masters Edition. So I'm going with all of the various foils of the Urza lands, and they're all around the same price. They're hitting around the $5 or bottoming out, I guess, at around the $5 mark right now. All of the Urza lands were very difficult to get in foil before. They were really only available in foil in 8th and 9th edition, and those are actually in the $50 to $60 range still for those. So I think that picking these up at around the $5 mark is a fantastic future investment, and there's a lot of room for upside on foils of the Urza lands from Double Masters. All right, I really hope you guys enjoyed this week in MTG Finance. If you did, go ahead and smash that like button. It really helps me out, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.